Thank you for coming tonight to this town hall. Braving the hot weather out there, we really appreciate you all taking the time out of your day to do this. My name is John Reid. I'm the Northeast Regional Organizer with the Union. We're a nonprofit pro-democracy organization organizing events like this to help voters get to know their candidates a little better and learn more about the issues. And so first of all, I want to thank our guest, Scott Konopasek, if I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Close enough.
Close enough.
Scott K.
It's Scott K. All right. He's running as a Democrat here in Virginia for the House of Delegates, District 59. We invited the incumbent, his opponent, Republican Buddy Fowler. He did not respond to us, so unfortunately, he's not going to be here tonight, but hopefully next time we do this. So with that, let's get started and let's get to know Scott a little bit, and at the end we can take some questions. So Scott, first off, I want to say thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
We appreciate it. I think the voters, since you're a first-time candidate, they'd like to know a little bit more about you. Can you tell us about your background, where you come from, and why you're deciding to run now?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I'm Scott Konopasek. I've been a lifetime public servant. I've served in the Army for 14 years as an intelligence officer, served in combat, and developed a strong ethos of protecting and defending our American way of life and American institutions. That rolled into a second career once I got out of the Army. Also in public service in local government, where I served in 4 different states over a period of 30 years as the principal election official, administering elections, making sure people were eligible, were registered to vote, got to vote, and their votes were fairly and accurately counted. So I've spent many, many years thinking about democracy and our processes. And I currently, in retirement, consult with the Carter Center out of Atlanta, working on democracy, resilience, and election integrity projects. So that's a lifelong thread through my life. So I learned that my opponent was going to be unopposed this election cycle. And as an election person, I realized that democracy doesn't work if voters don't have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
And no one else was stepping up to give voters that choice. Many times over the years, I've been invited and considered running for office, but it's never the right time. But this time I felt compelled to say, I need to give voters a choice. There are plenty of issues locally that I think need to be more thoroughly addressed than what they have been.
Mm-hmm.
I think the people of this district deserve a different type and tone and quality of representation. And layering over all of that is the federal level and all the chaos and uncertainty that is going on now, with the implication of dramatic changes happening in the way states manage themselves, the way states govern, and the way states administer programs. The state is going to have to backfill whatever gaps the federal government ends up leaving us.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that government deserves problem solvers and troubleshooters and compromisers and people who seek win-win solutions to problems.
Mm-hmm.
So that is kind of the fire in my belly that gave me the desire and the interest to run.
Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. So you mentioned your opponent previously running unopposed. What do you think, in your view, sets you apart from your opponent, Buddy Fowler?
Well, there are the obvious partisan perspectives that are different. Mm-hmm. I view the world from a left of center frame. Mm-hmm. And so solutions and decisions are kind of colored by that. But that also makes me more focused on the impacts that decisions and laws have on people. Mm-hmm. that's really important to me. We seem to have lost a little bit of humanity in the way our laws are passed and the way things govern. And I believe that we should be focused on not just the efficiency of what we're trying to do or what laws we pass, but that we consider what the implications are for people.
Mhm.
It seems at times that our system favors those that are already privileged,
Mhm.
those who already have a lot. And I think there's plenty of room in our legislative processes to consider and not forget and even protect those who don't have as much.
Mhm. And so you talked about, needing to kind of focus on the humanity when we're governing and making laws. Can you give a concrete example of that and how your approach might be different from your opponents?
Uh, Give me a second here to
Sure.
think about that. Well, let me just say that I believe that style matters, tone matters. One of the I received a constituent newsletter from the incumbent right at the end of the session, and the tone of the letter was mocking
Hmm.
uh, efforts to pass legislation to help those who were in need of help, those who had those that could have been helped,
Mm-hmm.
and the mocking tone and style I found to be not appropriate for someone who's been elected to represent a whole group of people with a range of different interests and needs and means.
Mm-hmm.
So rather than give a specific item, I guess a specific specificity would be in that letter and the mocking and degrading tone that was taken towards those bills that would have ameliorated and improved the lives of citizens.
Mm-hmm. So maybe a way of putting it is that the culture of politics and of partisanship, you think, is part of the problem. Is that fair to say?
Absolutely, and I wouldn't give the Democrats a pass either.
Okay.
I think the tone and tenor of all of our interactions, our discussions, our debates, really needs to be tempered
Mm-hmm.
and be more respectful and be more civil. I grew up in a time where civility and saying yes sir, no sir,
Mhm.
yes ma'am, no ma'am,
Yeah.
was a thing.
Mhm.
Uh, Even if you didn't necessarily feel that way on the inside,
Right.
you
right.
conducted yourself that way.
Mhm.
And I think that our politics, our political discourse, at the state level, at the county level, and at the federal level, all could use a good deal of improvement
Mhm.
in that regard. And it will take people to model that kind of behavior.
Mhm.
And I have modeled that behavior throughout my career, and
Mhm.
it's something that I believe that I would bring to not just the citizens of this district, but to all the citizens of the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Mhm. Okay. I want to ask you about elections. You mentioned your background working on elections.
Mhm.
Um, so, how are you thinking about protecting voting access and election integrity here in Virginia?
Oh boy, that's right up my alley. Are you have enough time? I could talk about this for weeks.
We don't have weeks, but we got
Okay.
some time.
So let me just focus in first on one thing, and that is voting rights. Uh, Americans' voting rights are under a renewed attack,
Mhm.
and not just minorities, and not just people of a certain political persuasion, but the president signed an executive order this winter
Mhm.
that would dramatically change the requirements for registering to vote.
Mhm.
The House of Representatives went with it and passed the SAVE Act.
Yeah.
It's now in the Senate, and hopefully it won't make it out. But there's some what I think are pernicious provisions in there that will that are intended to prevent non-citizens from voting.
Mhm.
So really a non-problem. But that solution risks taking away the right to vote of millions, tens of millions,
Yeah.
maybe even hundreds of millions of Americans that are already voting, already registered, because that bill would require retroactively that voters produce a documentary proof of citizenship.
Mhm.
Usually that's a birth certificate in most cases, or could be a passport, but those only half the population has a passport. Uh, the driver's license and real ID, different states have implemented real ID differently, so there's no guarantee that real ID will satisfy that. And one of the major provisions in there that concerns me is the requirement that the name on the birth certificate be the same as the person who's registering to vote.
Mhm.
That almost automatically excludes most married women or anyone who's had a name change or was adopted. And there's no grace period, there's no mechanisms to keep that requirement from permanently isolating people who are legitimate, eligible voters and who have voted for years. It risks keeping them from voting. The problem it's trying to solve is not so great that that solution merits the risk to most voters.
Mm.
In terms of the integrity of elections,
Mhm.
that term has been kind of co-opted by election deniers uh, who really aren't about uh, the integrity.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, since the last election, some on the left have adopted some of those same arguments because they don't like the outcomes.
Mhm.
And outcomes and the integrity of the process are two different things.
Mhm.
I have the utmost respect for my former colleagues who administer elections in a fair, nonpartisan, professional way, who are committed to fair, accurate votes every election, regardless who's on the ballot.
Mhm.
And to see them disparaged and to see those processes being interfered with by legislation aiming to solve problems that don't really exist,
Mhm.
bothers me a great deal. One particular issue here in Virginia uh, is that in many places across the country, citizens who have served their time, who may have been convicted of a crime and have served their time and paid their fines, and made their they made things right.
Mhm.
In many states, they automatically get their civil rights restored.
Mhm.
Here in Virginia, it's a very arbitrary process that uh, relies on the governor making individual decisions without any clearly articulated criteria for when a person would be eligible to get their rights restored. There's a proposed constitutional amendment here in Virginia that, if it makes it through the legislature one more time in 2028, the voters will have a chance to amend the Constitution to make the restoration of those rights automatic, which I think it should be.
Mhm. Okay. And do you think most voters here are aware of that?
I think many voters know it's an issue, and particularly in impacted communities. We all know, and the data bears out, that certain races and ethnic groups are overrepresented in our incarcerated population,
Mhm.
fairly or unfairly.
Mhm.
But they deserve, once they've paid their debt to society, to be able to be full participants in that society.
Okay. All right. So I want to talk about another issue that's important to a lot of voters
Okay.
here, and that's the issue of public education. So what's your plan to support and shore up public education, and how would you work with both sides of the aisle to make that happen?
Well, that's a great question. It's a particularly poignant question here in Hanover County, because we are one of a handful of counties in the state that has an appointed rather than elected school board. There's been much discussion over the last couple of years about changing it to representative elected board, but special interests have put a lot of money into defeating those initiatives. So one of the things that I think that I could do for this district in this community to influence the quality of education here in Hanover County would be to sponsor a bill that would require every district in the state to select their school board by election of the voters, rather than through the patronage system that we seem to have.
Okay.
I think the quality of decisions that are made about education would dramatically improve. The accountability of the decision makers to the public would improve. And I think that single thing right there would have an immediate and long-lasting impact on the quality of education. In terms of the larger question of the quality of education, funding is always part of the equation. My wife is a former high school teacher. My daughter-in-law is a high school teacher. We don't pay our teachers enough to keep the qualified, talented, committed people in the business. That's not a slight to those who currently teach. Many of them are making a personal sacrifice and are doing it out of a sense of duty and wanting to make a difference. But to get talent, if you look at sports teams, to get talent and retain talent, it takes money.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing I would say about education here in Virginia is the curricula are political footballs at the state level. And we need to find a way of buffering politics and partisanship from the curricula.
So what would be your solution for that?
I'm interested in hearing how people would solve that problem.
Okay.
I'm not an expert,
Okay.
but I know how to evaluate proposals and to play them out. One of the things that I'm known for is being a listener and a collaborator.
Okay.
And I recognize I don't know all the answers, but I know how to ask people who do know what they think. And I listen and I synthesize and move forward with a better idea that's a result of the input of many knowledgeable, talented, professional people.
Okay. And so then I want to talk about, what do you think is the number one most important issue facing folks in this district, and what would you do about it on day one?
Education was one of them in the school board, but this is a largely rural community, and jobs in the economy and good paying jobs are not in good supply, and people have to travel to other places to work. And we have kind of a tension going on between developing and inviting businesses into the area and those who want to preserve the character and way of life that the rural way of life that's important. Whether that's solar power, whether it's businesses, retail, warehousing, there are ways to meet the needs of the population to provide good paying jobs that are convenient and close to home, and still balance the interest in preserving the way of life and the standard of living that is so important to people in this district.
Okay. Right, so then we've talked about voting a little bit. I want to talk about kind of democracy in general. Right now, we're at a moment where there's a lot of mistrust in government across the board. And so how do you plan to reconnect with voters who feel disillusioned or don't want to participate in the democratic process right now?
First thing I would say is I am a firm believer that government is good. That government was created by our founding fathers to serve the needs of the people, to ensure our prosperity, to ensure our happiness. And we even have documents that say that that's the aim of government.
Yeah.
But we keep electing people who say government is bad.
Mm-hmm.
Government's the problem. So it's no surprise when they break it. And when they break government, it erodes the trust and confidence that people have because it no longer effectively provides the role that it's supposed to play.
Mm-hmm.
So without a doubt, government can do things better.
Mm-hmm.
Without a doubt, government makes mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Federal level, state level, local level. But do they learn from their mistakes?
Mm-hmm.
Do they go back and revisit what they did? Do they fine tune it?
Mm-hmm.
Do they apply process, quality process improvement criteria to what they do?
Mm-hmm.
Do they use modern management principles to evaluate what they did, find the waste, find the fraud, figure out how to get rid of it, and then get rid of it, roll on, and then stop and pause? And have we fixed it yet? Do we still need to make some tweaks? That's the way business works. That's what Six Sigma is all about. That's what total quality management is all about. That's what continuous improvement is all about. The Toyota manufacturing system. Those principles can easily be applied to the way government functions. I know because I've done it. But I don't want people to think that I'm saying that government should be run like a business. Absolutely not. But there are things, evaluation tools, evaluation processes that are well known and people are well skilled in that can be used to improve the processes and of government to make it more effective. So government that's only efficient, cheap, but not effective is not good government.
Right. Okay. And then, so you mentioned, this being a rural district, and currently it's represented by a Republican. When you have to go out there and talk to voters who, may not feel comfortable with the idea of a Democrat, or, voters who maybe voted for Trump, or voters who don't feel like they belong with either party, how do you connect with folks like that and earn their trust?
So over the years, because I was an election official, I was always nonpartisan. And I always talked and communicated and worked with the right and the left. So I'm familiar with the language and the sensitivities, and I'm not pushing my point of view on folks. But I will say that anyone who's happy with what's going on in Washington right now, don't vote for me. Because I'm not happy with it, and I want to do something to mitigate it, to change it, to push back. So if you want change, then I'm your candidate. If you have some buyer's remorse, the way things went since the election, I'm your candidate. Because I am for moving forward and not moving back. I see the damage that many of the changes that are being made are going to inflict, but we haven't realized yet the consequences of. But if you're okay with things the way they're going, cool. Vote for my opponent. If you're uncertain that we're going on the right path, or you're sure we're not going on the right path, I'm your candidate.
Okay, good to know. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about your military service that you mentioned. How has that shaped your approach to leadership and decision making, and how would you carry that spirit of service with you into your new role if you were to get elected?
Okay, that's a great question. First of all, I think if I were elected, it would be a continuation of my service and the lessons that I've learned over the years. I grew up on military bases. My dad was in the service. So I grew up with an ethos of public service, that it was an expectation that we defend the system that gave us all the rights and blessings that we enjoy as Americans. On a very practical level, as a young officer and a young NCO, the leadership lessons I learned were very formative,
Mhm.
and I learned them young, and I learned them early, and a lot of those lessons that I learned are not what you would necessarily associate with military service. If you're going to get your men that you're responsible to lead to follow you into a situation where they may die and do it willingly, you have to treat them as human beings.
Mhm.
You have to respect them,
Mhm.
and you have to have earned that respect. Uh, and it kind of circles back to what we were talking about earlier about the
Mhm.
humanity.
Yeah.
Uh, understanding how to pull people together for a common purpose, a common cause, be willing to make sacrifices of their own for the better good, for the good of the whole.
Mhm.
And that ethos, those principles, and those techniques are probably the most important thing leadership principles that I take from my military experience.
Okay. And then for here in Virginia, what do you see as the biggest challenges facing veterans in Virginia and here in your district, and how would you address them?
Oh boy. So it's not just veterans here in Virginia.
Mhm.
There are, again, in the name of efficiencies, there are many changes that are being made, cuts that are being made
Mhm.
at the federal level in the Department of Veteran Affairs.
Mhm.
I'm a disabled veteran. I get my health care through the VA.
Mhm.
That's being impacted.
Mhm.
The benefits that I get, the small acknowledgement that I get from the government for the physical and mental toll that serving in combat took on me
Mhm.
is in jeopardy.
Mhm.
And people who have spent their lives, dedicated their lives, signed that check that said, you can take my life in defense of this country,
Mhm.
they deserve respect, and they deserve probably more than what they get, but they certainly don't deserve to have what they're currently getting taken away from
Mhm.
or curtailed.
Mhm.
So I think that the respect for veterans and as it manifested in policies and in budgets uh, it is having a tremendous impact.
Mhm.
And there was a time, and I had a draft card, there was a time that military service was compulsory.
Mhm.
It wasn't voluntary.
Mhm.
And when it was, more people had an understanding of what that service meant
Mhm.
and the sacrifices needed. And I think more respect was accorded to
Mhm.
veterans. Once it became voluntary, it looked like a job
Mhm.
that only suckers and losers would take that kind of job, right?
As someone said, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that attitude about veterans is very damaging and indicative of uh, the character of the person who
Mhm.
says those things.
Sure. So then it sounds like you think that maybe the general public doesn't understand what service means the way they did a generation or two ago.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Um, and I think that there should be some type of service that young people should be required,
Mhm.
regardless of their situation or their abilities. There's some service that I think should be required of all of our young people before they enter adulthood.
Mhm.
That's appropriate to their abilities. It's not just military service, uh, but also there are many social problems,
Yeah.
economic problems,
Sure.
things that could be addressed by having some service, fighting wildfires, literacy programs, delivering meals on wheels to seniors,
Mhm.
packing those meals, cooking those. There's
Mhm.
a lot of things that uh, our young people can do. Number one, to serve their country and
Mhm.
make society better, but also get the experience of doing something for a cause greater than themselves.
Mhm. So it sounds like in the course of this conversation that service has been a big theme in your life and something that's very important to you. Can I ask where does that come from for you?
It came from my parents,
Mhm.
and it came also from my faith.
Mhm.
When I was a young man, 19 years old, I
Mhm.
went and served 2 years at my own expense as a missionary in a foreign country. Uh, that's the service to God and the service to our community that complements my service to country. That I think the combination of those have made me extremely focused on service.
It sounds like that had a pretty powerful effect.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, then I just kind of wrapping up, just want to transition to talking about your campaign and kind of the state of politics, and what are ways that you think kind of average people can kind of get more engaged with the system, and how are you trying to get people involved with your campaign, and what sorts of things are you looking to have people do?
Okay, the very first thing is people need to make sure that they're prepared to vote. We have a 2-step process where you have to register and then you have to show up. Okay, so make sure that you're ready. For better or for worse, we have a system that requires money to run campaigns. And a small contribution, $5, $10, $25, goes a long way for getting this message out to people. And there will be, as we get closer to the election, opportunities to knock doors, to place signs, to make phone calls on behalf of this campaign and this message. So if someone's interested in this message and promoting it, talk to your neighbors, make sure you're registered to vote, go to scottk4va.com, chip in a couple of bucks so we can make this work. Okay. I want your money and not special interest money.
Right.
I want money from people in the district and not from people from California.
Okay. All right. And then last question. What's something about you that people may not know or that might surprise people, or a fun fact about you?
I'm a lousy square dancer, but I do it anyway.
Oh.
Because my wife makes me.
Oh.
But also I'm a furniture maker, an artist. Okay. So I'm a woodworker. And I've made many things over the years, some semi-professionally.
So better at woodworking than square dancing.
You're more comfortable with it, definitely.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Scott. It's been a pleasure. We've got a few minutes left, so I think now we'll take a few questions from the audience if folks have any. If anyone's got a question, feel free. And
No, I'm fine. I just wanted to. I was very pleased with what I heard. I guess just a little bit more about how you can stand as a buffer between what we're seeing in the federal government and the Virginians.
Okay. Well, the way I anticipate this is going to play out is we won't be able to stop the federal government from doing what they're doing. In fact, most of the damage has already been done. The consequences and the implications haven't rolled downhill all the way yet. So I see the challenge of state government in terms of buffering the citizens of Virginia is making sure that the impacts of those changes are mitigated. That where we have choices to plug gaps, that we plug gaps, that we prioritize the budget and projects in ways that we may not have done it in the past, to make sure that Virginians are not harmed, or to mitigate the harm that tariffs and cuts and wars and political violence are going to have on our state.
And I also say that as a newly retired ESL teacher. So I'm also looking at that aspect of what's happening and kind of keeping in touch with my students.
That's right. And early on, I said tone matters. When policies are drafted and implemented with malice and with cruelty, and people take pleasure in that, that's not the style of leadership that I think America deserves. And I think that that's the type of thing that all Virginians, all voters should put their foot down and say, no, enough.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other
You
questions?
spoke a little bit about like the rural way of life, and you mentioned solar panels in it. How do you see like alternative energy, like such as solar panels, sort of augmenting the rural way of life, and like to some constituents who may be hesitant to adopt these technologies? What would you say to them?
That's a good question, and it's a really poignant question for this district. There are currently controversies about converting land previously used for agriculture into solar or wind farms. First of all, we need clean energy. This country needs more energy, and the energy that we need to build our economy needs to be clean. Now, solar can be ugly, but it doesn't have to be. Solar can be an eyesore, but it doesn't have to be. Solar could have a negative impact on the environment, but it doesn't have to. We have to find those solutions that both preserve the appearance of the countryside, preserves the land, the value of the land, preserves the ecology, while leveraging the technology to produce clean energy. It's the same for wind energy. And I've always been a proponent or opponent of nuclear energy, but it's been 60 years since we really looked at that as an option. Technology has changed a lot. We know a lot more about how to manage the waste and hazards, and I think we really need to take a serious look at where nuclear energy can augment. It might actually now be a cleaner way than what we've ever had before, right? We don't know. We have to take a look at it. So that's my take on solar. I think it would be great if, and this is more of a local type of ordinance, but I think it would be great that if new developments that had large parking lots over 20 spaces or something were required to put solar shelters over the top. It would remove an eyesore. It would cool the environment by keeping the asphalt from getting so hot, and it would be generating electricity at the same time. And it wouldn't be an eyesore. So I think that there are solutions like that available if people are inventive and creative and willing to work with each other to meet the needs of all parties.
Sure.
If I might piggyback on that a little bit, because that's actually an idea that I saw done quite a bit on military installations, especially in Nevada and Arizona and California, where they would cover the parking lots, right, with solar power cells. And it has the added benefit of creating shade for the vehicle that's parked under it, right, which is pretty important in Las Vegas, at Nellis Air Force Base, for example. What about, though, the part where Dominion Power and other electricity co-ops and generating companies push back? Because the more you expand residential and commercial solar power and you create the conditions where homes and businesses are fueled by their own power, they're generating themselves. Dominion has in the past pushed back and said, we don't want to let you do that. And they spend lots of money on lobbying, and they have several legislators in Virginia, sort of, I won't say in their pocket, but, listen to them more closely. What would you do about that?
So that kind of ties into another issue, which is the role of campaign finance and campaign donations. Anyone who thinks that a company can give a candidate money and not get a benefit in return is crazy. people buy influence. And the more money they give, the more influence they expect to buy. Virginia's campaign finance laws are the Wild West. We take some pride in saying that. But it's corrupting our system. When the regulated company can buy the influence with the regulators, you can't think that everyone's going to be doing what's in the interest of everyone. They're going to be serving the interests of those who have paid for that access. And I don't care which party, I don't care which candidate, I don't care what level of office, that type of campaign financing corrupts by definition.
Thanks. Thank you.
I just thought of something because it's recent. The data centers, now I don't live near a data center, but I've thought before that has anyone considered building them underground? Because that sort of serves several purposes. It keeps them cool. It protects them from harm, right? And then you can, you can landscape it. You could leave it open for wildlife or, whatever else I was just wondering. And then hopefully you wouldn't have that noise issue that the neighbors are complaining about.
Right.
But has anyone
That sounds like an excellent idea that should be explored. I imagine that someone has looked into it, but I would also imagine that the costs are different than building one above ground in areas where people don't have the political capital to fight it and resist it. But that would be an interesting question. In this world, nowadays, we need data centers. They don't all have to be in Virginia. There's plenty of other places they could be, and they all, like your point, they don't all have to be above ground. But yeah, this is another example of a public good that we need. We need data centers, but there are trade-offs, and some people are going to be paying a greater price for that than others. We need to find a way of having both. And that takes compromise, and it takes creativity and imagination.
All right. Are there any other questions for Scott? Okay. All right. Well, I just want to say thank you all for coming here tonight, and again for braving that heat. It would have been easy to just come and just stay in the air conditioning. And then just want to give a big thank you to Scott for coming out to this town hall. Hopefully it was informative, and hopefully we can do it again soon sometime.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah. Thank you, Scott.
you.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yes.